one of the 3 to 4 major fractions in Warframe, the Grineer. The other major fractions being the Corpus, Infestation, and Corrupted. Corrupted you can put in, but some leave it out. Grineer is the first fraction you are introduced to as you start Warframe. You're immediately introduced to Vor and all of his troops, going from Earth to Mercury, which are both controlled by the Grineer. Now before I get ahead of myself, let's see how the Grineer came to be. As everything in Warframe, it all pretty much came from the old days, the Orcan, when it was an empire in its prime. Some could say it's like the Roman Empire. Here, the Grineer was made. They were genetically modified clones of the Orcan Empire. Programmed as slaves, the Grineer were tasked to perform manual labor, gathering resources for the Orcan. You can see them still performing labor in some missions on Grineer-controlled planets, but of course we will get into that later. During the Old War, the Orcan was desperate to defeat the Sentients. If you don't know this, meaning you haven't played all of the quests, the Sentients and the Orcan were in a long, large war. A very interesting story. Since they were desperate to defeat the strong, continually adapting Sentients, they created a new breed of Grineer, ones that can fight. This new breed started from a gene sample of an individual who managed to defeat a sentient. Just imagine Call being a worker and suddenly being able to do what he does now. This is the type of Grineer they took a sample from, making a new militarized Grineer breed. This new Grineer military was deployed in the Old War. However, they proved to do nothing, not a single thing. They were easily defeated by the sentients' strategies and defenses. This is when Warframes were eventually created. I won't talk about Warframes a lot since they have their own story, however we need to talk about them for some context. The Warframes eventually led the Orcan to victory. However, they were betrayed by the Tenno who controlled them. Reading this, I did think of one thing. Was this an actual betrayal? As we know, the Tenno were kind of endangered. From my understanding, they were protected and then found again by the Lotus. Did they actually do it? Did they have to leave? Also, Warframes are just empty metal shells, so it's not like they left a dog behind or anything like that. They just left a shell. Now after the Orcan Empire collapsed, the Grineer started to congregate, forming a large group to take over territory and technology that once belonged to the Orcan. During this process, as they were establishing themselves, they encountered Orcan twins who helped them fight against those who tried to restore the Orcan Empire. Now if twins and Grineer together sound familiar, well it's because these are the twins you're thinking of. Except I don't know how they could have helped much. They just don't seem like they could have done much. Move, I guess. These twins were adopted by the Grineer as their queens, believing they attained, quote, something more than a whole, a true understanding of each other's soul. The Grineer love the fact that they seem to have a true understanding. I mean, the Grineer are all clones, so they don't really have an understanding of anything but what they are designed to do. Not much free thought in a Grineer clone. This is the start of what we know as the Grineer now. Present-day Grineer have their home world, this home world being the overgrown Earth. Although this is their home world, they have the weakest control here since they poison the planet's ecology to make it more suited for themselves. However, they don't control all of Earth, and I'm not just talking about the natural parts they can't access. I'm talking about Cetus and Iron Wake. Iron Wake is a secret steel meridian base on Earth, which also has some red veil there too. This is really just good Grineer, I guess, as the steel meridian seems like a part of the Grineer, ones that can think for themselves and recruit good ones. Cetus, well, is Cetus. I don't know what they're technically called, besides just being called Ostrons. Ostron is the syndicate at Cetus. From what we know, they are survivors that form their own community and trade or market. Now of course there are other planets that the Grineer have majority of control over, these planets being Ceres, Sedna, Uranus, Mars, and Saturn, as well as the Veil Proximas that are on any of these planets that I just mentioned. They have a main fortress. Although Earth is their home world, they prefer their fortress. This fortress is the Kuva Fortress, which is located on, or technically is a part of an asteroid that is constantly moving in the star chart, navigation, solar system, whatever you like to call it. This Kuva Fortress asteroid can move. This is due to their Fomorian engines that help guide the asteroid to where it needs to go. This fortress is also home to their queens, the twin queens. Hideous looking, sorry if you think otherwise, but the queens reside here, guarded by their Kuva guardians. Every enemy here is a Kuva version of their original self, and as you can imagine, with this being home of the queens, this is heavily fortified and guarded. The queens also have something to do with a special unit called Kuva Liches, which we will get into later in this video. Now, as I mentioned earlier, if you were paying attention, the Grineer are clones and are not good at thinking for themselves. With this, the Grineer are very loyal and only loyal to the queens. They hate anyone who isn't the Grineer, except for when the Tenno helps them out, I guess. Although they are very loyal to the queens, not all of them even see the queen in their lifetime. Since all Grineer blindly follow the queens, let's take a moment to appreciate the goats. Call and the greatest of all time. To sum the Grineer and queen relationship up, it's a cult, for the most part. Now we talked about the Grineer becoming militarized, but how militarized are they? The Grineer are heavily armored, which is why everyone tests weapons in the game against heavy gunners. They also have two main fighting or attacking styles, attrition and ambush. Attrition warfare is a military strategy that consists of wearing down the enemy to the point that they collapse or give up by destroying their personnel, material, and morale. Ambush, meaning to destroy or harass enemy forces. So this fits the Grineer pretty well, if of course you've played the game and have been against the Grineer often. Now it makes sense that they use these types of warfare, as Grineer are pretty weak on their own. They are better in groups of Grineer units, combining all types of units into one works best. There are some specialist troops in the Grineer. They have advanced weapons, armor, and other cybernetics. An example of an advanced weapon or special troop is the Bombard or Ogress. Bombard being the troop, Ogress being the weapon. One of the hardest troops in the Grineer, with the amount of armor that they have and the damage that Ogress can deal. With this example, there are obviously many more one could point out, such as the Heavy Gunner, with a lot of armor and a high fire rate Gorgon. As you've heard me say a lot, Grineer on average have a lot of armor. With this armor, they also have their own elemental resistance. Even the common Grineer troops like the Elite Lancer is heavily armored compared to other fractions. This makes the Grineer one of the tougher fractions in Warframe. Now there's a thing called Empyrean, which is just the Railjack missions. This is basically dogfights in space, and these Grineer have even higher defenses than they do on the normal planets. And with the specialist troops, I mentioned more advanced cybernetics. Some of these advances are teleportation. There are two types that are used by them. One of them is used like Ash, which is on the special troop called Flame Blades. They teleport to the Warframe in order to do a melee attack. The other teleportation is done by the troop commander, which switches spots with the Warframe, similar to Loki's teleport. There's some bosses who use these types of teleportations, which is Tal Rigor and Captain Vor. Before I get into the types of weapons they have, let's talk about Kuva Liches. All Grineer are clones, and they all have short lives. However, some are granted immortality by the queens in the form of old blood. The Grineer that get picked are called Kuva Larveling. These Larvelings are selected by the Kuva Guardians. Once picked, they are sent as bait to get killed by a Warframe, absorbing energy and abilities when they are killed. They are then selected as an adversary of the Tenno. This then spawns the Kuva Lich, and they occupy Earth first, moving on to other planets occupied by Grineer. The Tenno then goes after them, killing them once they figure out the Requiem sequence needed to kill them. These Liches are very powerful. Not only do they adopt some abilities from the Warframe that kills them, the Larveling, but they also have the most powerful weapon that the Grineer own, Kuva weapons. So Kuva Liches have the most powerful weapons, they have abilities from frames, which means they are the most powerful Grineer. The Grineer have all sorts of weapons, all the types of weapons being pistols, rifles, heavy rifles, shotguns, machine guns, missile launchers, flamethrowers, melee weapons with superheated surfaces, hydraulically assisted axes, hammers, and flail-like whips with hooked grinding blades. The weapons typically look curved, rounded, and heavily plated. It looks like it was made quickly, welded together in a second, which is actually kind of how they are made, quickly without much care. When comparing Grineer weapons to Tenno or Corpus weapons, they clearly lack some precision. They are made in the billions, mass-produced, as the Grineer focus more on how many they have than how well they are made. They are made from ferrite and alloys, which are resources you can get from most of the Grineer planets. Grineer weapons mainly deal impact or slash damage, focusing on raw damage. They mainly deal these damage types to work well against Corpus and Infestation, as impact is best against Corpus and slash is best against Infestation. The Grineer have also developed primitive microwave and plasma-aided projectile weapons, as well as a rifle that fires guided projectiles. They developed these, although Lotus did try to stop it, and if you ask me, it doesn't seem like she tried at all. The weapons I just mentioned are reserved for the elite of the elites, these elites being Nightwatch Corps and guards of the Queen's Fortress. But again, the most powerful weapons are used by the Kuva Liches. The Grineer are divided into Grineer Corps, these being Space Marines, Frontier, Drakkar, Arid, Tusk, Nightwatch, Kuva, and Cosma Yuri Exo. The last three are all really the same corp. The Space Machines are the bulk of the Grineer forces, guarding mining and production facilities. Frontiers are Grineer units specialized in guerrilla combat on Earth, in the overgrown forests and jungle. Drakkars are stationed in deep-sea laboratories on Earth and Uranus. Arids are units specialized in desert warfare in places like Mars, where it is very dusty, so their gear is adapted for these environments. Tusk units are in the plains of Eidolon, generally having longer range weapons. Nightwatch Grineer are a special operations crew, not unit, tasked with elite assignments throughout the solar system. They are rarely seen but well equipped. They use modified equipment to be so elite in battle. And of course, Kuva Grineer, they can be at other locations but only when a Kuva collection is going on or when they are invading the Zerman 10-0, aka the Chrysalith. Their equipment is made to have more stopping power than their usual focus on fire rate. However, there are troops that are called Kuva but technically do not fall under this category of Kuva Grineer, such as Larvelings, Thralls, and Liches. Cosma Yuri and Exo units are present during Empyrean missions, specializing in support duties on cruise ships and intercepting and boarding railjacks. Now I will go through all the types of Grineer, naming and showing every Grineer troop. But before I do that, let's look at the Grineer language.
Huts Brigger Ataf Gratkle
It's pretty odd when you first look at it. It's very block-like, just different types of rectangles and squares really. Now, although there are things you can find where people have deciphered their language, that may not be true exactly. Although there is some thought behind it, apparently DE did not intend for this to be translated to actually make out stuff, unless it's subtitled, but that's when they are speaking and the captions are on. In some cases, you can find long strings of text that have random letters in that text rotated or flipped. When they speak, it may sound kind of familiar. That's because it's a heavily corrupted form of English, with a lot of grunts. Now the troops. There are sectioned off an armor class to start off, then we will get into some of the abnormal Grineer troops. Starting off with the light class, there is Butcher, Flameblade, Guardsman, Power Fist, Scorpion, and Shield Lancer. I will not go into detail about these unless I need to describe where they are or what they are. Next is the medium class, consisting of Ballista, Elite Lancer, Eviscerator, Hellion, Lancer, Scorch, Seeker, and Trooper. The heavy class consisting of Bailiff, Bombard, Commander, Drakmaster, Elite Shield Lancer, Heavy Gunner, Haika Master, Manic, Manic Bombard, Napalm, and Nox. Now that's the armor class of normal troops out of the way. Next are the more abnormal Grineer troops. There are arena troops. Nobody does the arena. I don't feel like it's necessary to say everyone, so here are just images of them. Ghouls, these are the ones that you see in the Plains of Eidolon during specific events. The ghouls are Ghoul Augur, Ghoul Devourer, Ghoul Expired, and Ghoul Rictus. Next is Archwing, consisting of Dreg, Lancer Dreg, Temporal Dreg, and Ogma. This next group can be found in Archwing missions, Plains of Eidolon, and the Kuva Fortress. This group consisting of Darjan, Hellion Darjan, Shield Darjan, and Shield Hellion Darjan. Pretty simple. Next is Submersibles, consisting of Draga, Derek Draga, Shock Draga, and Sikula, which is a drone. Empyrean, which is Railjack missions, consisting of Cutter, Flak, and Tactus as fighters, Heavy Fighters as Outriders, and Gokstad cruise ship and Skold cruise ship as well. Finally, we have reached the end, where we go through the bosses of the Grineer. The bosses being Captain Vor, Counselor Vahek, General Sargus Ruck, Grustrag 3, Kella Dathame, Lieutenant Lek Krill, Sprag, Talragor, and Venkra Tel. Now that is all the troops of the Grineer, all named out and shown on screen. That also means that this is the end of the video. I hope you all enjoyed this video on the Grineer. I plan on doing the same thing on the Corpus, Infestation, and other fractions included in Warframe. Maybe some other mythology that ties into Warframe as well. Let me know what you would like to see in the comments. I appreciate you all, and I'm so sorry for the lack of consistent uploads. Now with all that said, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.
Good.